SMA and EMA. So let's say we go to SMA, and here is the definition. So it means a function of SMA. It basically takes input, and here if you see period is written how much? 30. So by default it is taking how much? 30 as the input. So we can change this to 5 or 10 or whatever input that we want. Okay, and output is basically provides it in the form of list. So whenever you have used SMA, there you need to supply him with the array and the period, and if it is not being mentioned the period, by default he will take it as 30, right? So you can call this function now and it will do the SMA. Let's go out and see EMA. Same thing. EMA is a function where again it takes as an array and it takes input as a period. Again the period is mentioned as 30, right? So again we have a constant period, but you can again change. By default it is 30. You can change it to whatever you want. So this way now you have other indicators as well. So before you go there, we have understood now two indicators somewhat, what is EMA and what is SMA. Now going where it started from. So here if you try to see the main case which is there, okay, and in this case first we are getting the get data, okay, and then we are parsing out the data as high, low and close. This is fine. This is important indicators for our analysis. We are going to indicators file and we are passing there, we are using a function called as SMA. To that we are passing which price is over here? Close price. And how did you get the close price? We have used get close from the data. From where did you get the data? From the condel using the get data logic, right? So that is why the importance was of getting the data, then using it in extracting only the close. Now we are passing the close in this SMA. If you see EMA, what are we passing over here? Again the close. So don't you think close is important, right? So extracting the data and then extracting the close from the data was also equally important. Once we did that, now we are passing close. Along with this, you can overwrite period. If I have mentioned over here as 10, what will it do? It will make use of 10 rather than 30. But if you do not mention anything over here, like here in EMA, I have not mentioned anything, what will happen? So I need to see what is the default usage which has been done. So in EMA, default period is how much? 30, right? So this is how you can understand when you're using this. So let's say EMA also, I also want period as, sorry. So if you see now, it is taking as an input, okay, which is mentioned as, I also put it as 10. So what will he do now? He'll also now calculate the EMA where the period is 10. He'll also calculate the SMA where the period is 10. So input key has been changed or not, right? So what we were changing on the chart, which I showed you over here, the same thing we are doing it. So here also we did the same thing, right? In this case, input we were changing it over here. We are basically supplying that as the function. In the function, we are trying to supply it as an input key called as period. And here you need to also supply close. Now let's see whether this close was also mentioned here or not. Correct? Is it not the same thing what you're seeing it, or you're using it on the charting tool? Now you are making your own tool. You're trying to basically use the data. So first we got this data which is in the candle form or the line form. The second was to you make use of this indicator where you give as input and you take the price and plot this as the output. So now we are getting a candle chart and you can see two indicators over here. So when you are seeing two indicators over here, same now you know that we have calculated SMA, we have calculated EMA, and both of them we have supplied the close and we have supplied the period. If you do not supply, it takes 30, correct, as per the definition. But if you have put 10, that means both of them will calculate this EMA and SMA at input of 10, last 10 days kind of stuff. And then it is being stored in this EMA and this SMA. So my calculation is performed or not? Now did you understand why is he taking the close price and the period, right? So normally this indicator makes use of the close price and it makes use of the period as the input, right? And here we have mentioned it as 10. You can change it as well. So example, if I want to now use 2 EMA, what will I do? Right? So we did another strategy where we said, okay, I want EMA. So this is EMA 10 and SMA 10. What we see over here, correct? This is SMA 10 and this is EMA 10. But if I now want EMA 5 and EMA 10, what should I do? Right? Change the input. But if I change it over here, 10 will get changed. I want this, but along with this, I want 5. So don't you think you need to call this function twice? Yes. Correct? And assign it not in the same EMA. You can, yeah, you can basically EMA 1 or EMA 5 and EMA 10. So the agenda here is you can again use this EMA, right? Past close, but change the period to 5. Correct? So all you need to do, whatever you did on the front chart, was basically what we are trying to do it on the code. We are just trying to change the input and we get two outputs of two different EMA, EMA 5 and EMA 10. So similarly, now we have MACD, we have RSI, we have stochastic, we have Bollinger Band, and these, and then you also have pivot. So we'll take one by one, each of them. Let's say now you have understood somewhat about SMA and EMA, and both of them are using 10 as the period. It is getting you the calculation of EMA and SMA, right? So that is now been stored under this, each of them as EMA and as SMA, and each of them are basically a form of a list. So if you see the variable SMA and it is inferred as list. So we have list of SMA calculation which is given over here. Now once you have EMA and SMA, okay, let's go down because this was the first one, indicators for your analysis. So if you are seeing the to-do part, indicator for analysis, and then inside this there are many more subsections of one. Okay, display the info of the indicator, then use the indicator for your analysis. So here we are trying to display the indicator information. So whatever indicator you're using, what is the name of the indicator that needs to be displayed. So this will come later, but this is what we were trying to see. We basically saw EMA and SMA function. So SMA was basically trying to give input, take input as data which is closed, and we are providing period as 30. But if you write your period, it will supersede that. So it will not take 30, but if you do not mention anything, it will take 30. Same, we went out and understood EMA, where you have to supply the data, where you are trying to supply in form of close, and you need to mention period. If you do not mention, it takes 30. So these are the definitions of each of these technical indicators which are there, but we will go inside them one by one. But just to show you, when we are using this SMA as a function, the most important point, which is if you go inside this SMA, okay, what has been done in SMA? You are calling it from the main function. Your SMA is written where you are supplying close and the period. Now let's go and see. It will supply you as the list. That is fine. But when I go inside this, if you see over here, there are series of if else written, which is nothing but warning signals. If I go inside and see, it's calculating the length of the array, saying how much is it less than the period, and it is calculating. The most important part is over here, it is been using something called as talib.sma. So now what has happened over here? SMA is another function. So this SMA you wrote, and this is the main SMA in capital which is written, and this is written where? Inside talib, right? So the point here is you need to understand that talib is not a basic variable or something. The talib needs to be also included in this project or not, because you are using finally a function which is present inside the talib. So you're trying to assess the already written function inside the talib. So as I told you, what you need to do is just send your information or close information what you had in that array and your period to this guy called as SMA, which is the part of talib. So we are basically making use of all the functions which are predefined in talib, and the entire explanation, if anyone is interested, entire explanation is given how this entire SMA is calculated, right? So have we performed the calculation of SMA? No. We have just used a library which basically has these functions, and we have basically made our output from that. So once you call them, it will return as an output and it gets stored in the result. And whatever result you get, we are trying to return the result at the end. So the agenda is I get the information from the top, right? So I get information and the period, I pass it to my SMA. So data of close and period is passed over here, which is assigned in array and in period. Once you go down and you see that array is passed over here and period is passed over here. So that means you are basically taking input and giving it to someone else to do the job. Once the job is done, you are making use of that, storing it in result and passing it back. So ideally, what have you done? You are basically making use of Talib. Right? So now can I say Talib is a technical library which has predefined functions of indicators, right? And the first indicator that we have used over here is SMA and EMA. So now I should also mention, when we are using indicator, I am using Talib, okay, and the functions inside the Talib, they basically have predefined functions. So you can also look out Talib where all the description of these functions are given, right? All the functions which are present. So I have just done SMA or I have just done EMA. Don't you think you can take any indicator which is present in the Talib, correct, and make use of it, and you can access it, and you can basically plot it, or you can use it for your own logic. So Talib is a good library for technical tools or technical indicators. It basically has predefined functions.